Have you ever felt that cold prickle on the back of your neck, a warning from deep inside your bones? It's an ancient instinct, a whisper from when we were prey, not predators. Most of us ignore it now, living in bright cities, convinced we're safe. But some places remember the darkness. In those places the line between our world and something else is thin. The Uinta Basin in Utah is one of those places. It's a land heavy with secrets, home to legends whispered in fear, strange lights, inhuman creatures, and a name, Skinwalker Ranch. This is the story of a weekend that began with excitement and ended in terror. We thought we were just escaping the city for a quiet trip. Instead, we found something ancient and hungry. When the wilderness looks back at you, sometimes you should run. This is what happened in that small cabin under the dark Utah sky. Some legends are more than stories. They're warnings. We learned that the hard way, and we barely made it out. There were 3 of us, me, Liam, and his cousin Sarah. We packed up and drove deep into the Utah wilderness, chasing the promise of peace. The city faded, replaced by red rocks and endless trees. Dirt roads swallowed our truck, cell service vanished. We passed a battered sign near Skinwalker Ranch, private property, no trespassing. We laughed it off, feeling brave in the daylight. The cabin was small, rustic, and isolated, perfect, or so we thought. The owner left a note. Enjoy the quiet, lock the door at night. We shrugged it off, eager to explore. The woods stretched in every direction, beautiful and vast. We felt free, alone, untouchable. But as the sun dipped, that feeling changed. The peace was an illusion. We were not alone. Something was waiting in those woods. And it was watching us. The real trip was about to begin. Evening brought laughter, warmth, and the comfort of firelight. But as the sun vanished, the forest changed. The lively sounds of birds and insects fell away, replaced by a heavy, unnatural silence. It was the kind of quiet that signals a predator is near. We felt it, a cold, watchful presence pressing in from the trees. The woods, once inviting, now seemed menacing, tall shadows standing guard. We tried to ignore it, blaming our nerves, but the sense of being watched only grew. The cabin felt small, fragile, surrounded by something vast and hostile. We closed the curtains, voices hushed, laughter gone. The silence outside was alive, waiting. Inside, our hearts pounded. We told ourselves it was nothing, but deep down we knew better. The night was just beginning. The silence shattered. A scream tore through the night. It wasn't human. It wasn't any animal we knew. It was pain and rage echoing through the trees, freezing us in place. The scream stopped, leaving a silence even heavier than before. Sarah whispered, "What was that?" No one answered. Liam tried to reason. Maybe a mountain lion, but we all knew better. The sound was wrong. It felt intelligent, malevolent. We waited, every noise making us jump. Then the scream came again, closer this time, just beyond the clearing. After it faded, a new sound, a woman's voice, weak and desperate, calling for help. For a moment, concern replaced fear, but the voice came from the same place as the scream. It was a trap. Old stories flooded back, creatures that mimic voices to lure you out. We stayed inside, paralyzed. The voice kept calling, but we didn't move. We knew what waited in the dark, and it wanted us to come outside. "Don't open the door," I said, voice shaking. The cries outside shifted, woman, child, then my father's voice, though he was far away. It was bait, and we were the prey. We backed away from the windows, huddling by the fire. Then Liam pointed. A gap in the curtain revealed 2 glowing yellow-green eyes at the tree line, too high, too far apart for any animal. They watched us, cold and intelligent. A shape emerged, tall, thin, darker than the night, moving on 2 spindly legs. Its arms hung too long, its movements jerky and wrong. It stepped into the moonlight, a nightmare-given form. It was not human, not animal. It was something else, and it was looking right at us. We froze, unable to look away. The thing outside knew we were there. It knew we were afraid, and it was just getting started. The real horror had arrived. We were trapped. We stumbled back, terror-stricken. The creature was real, no trick of the light. Curtains drawn, we clung to the fire's dim glow, feeling its gaze through the walls. Then, knocking, hard, sharp, relentless. We barricaded the door with furniture, desperate for safety. The knocking stopped. replaced by slow, deliberate scratching along the walls. It circled the cabin, searching for a way in. Then, it mimicked Liam's voice, perfectly. "Sarah? Josh, let me in. I just went for firewood." Liam was beside us, white with fear. The creature was learning, using our voices to confuse and divide us. We huddled together as far from the walls as possible. The thing outside was intelligent and cruel. It wanted to come in, and it wasn't going to stop. We waited, breathless, as it prowled the darkness. The night stretched on. The hours crawled by, each one worse than the last. The creature never broke in. It tormented us with scratching, knocking, and whispered mimicry. It circled, patient, relentless, whispering our names in twisted voices. At one point, tapping came from the roof, then the chimney. We watched the fireplace, terrified it would come down. The fire died, the room grew cold, and shadows stretched long. We sat back to back, too afraid to move or speak. Every sound outside was a fresh wave of terror. Sleep was impossible, we just waited for the end. The creature's patience seemed infinite. We were sure we wouldn't survive until morning. The nightmare felt endless. We clung to each other, hoping for dawn, and prayed the walls would hold. Dawn finally came, a faint gray light breaking the nightmare. As the sun rose, the sounds outside faded. The creature vanished with the darkness. We waited, barely breathing, until birdsong returned. Only then did we dare to move. We grabbed our things, barely packing, and rushed to the truck. Unlocking the door was terrifying, but nothing waited outside, just the empty clearing. We didn't look back, didn't check for scratch marks. As we drove away, I glanced in the mirror. For a moment I saw it. Tall, thin, a dark silhouette at the forest's edge, watching us leave. I said nothing to the others. We just drove, desperate to escape. The terror of the night clung to us. We knew we'd been lucky. We'd survived, but we'd never be the same. Some things in the wilderness are better left undisturbed, and some eyes never stop watching. We left the cabin behind, but the memory followed us home. The drive back was silent. None of us could speak about what happened. Relief came only when we saw the first signs of town. We tried to forget, to explain it away. Foxes, owls, branches. But we knew the truth. We'd come face to face with something ancient, something that lives in the dark. I've read the legends since. Skinwalkers, shapeshifters, mimics. They say to look one in the eyes is to invite it in. We didn't just visit Skinwalker Ranch, we met its oldest resident. So here's my warning. If you hear a voice calling for help in the night, don't answer. Lock your door. Stay inside. No matter what it sounds like, it's not who you think. Some things, once you let them in, never leave. And some legends are true. They used to call it Route 666, the Devil's Highway, a name that sent chills down the spine of anyone who heard it. Now it's Route 491, but the name change didn't erase its darkness or the stories that linger. I was hauling machine parts through the New Mexico desert, completely alone, the night pressing in like a heavy weight. My headlights cut through blackness, revealing only empty road ahead and the occasional tumbleweed. The radio was nothing but static, like distant voices whispering secrets just out of reach. Out here, legends cling to the asphalt, stories of disappearances, of things that cross over when the veil is thin and the night is deep. That night I started to believe the whispers. The desert wasn't empty, it was waiting for something. Something flickered at the edge of my headlights, a brief glimmer in the darkness that made my heart skip a beat. The night was thick and silent, the only sound the hum of my engine and the tires rolling over the lonely asphalt. A shape, running, keeping pace with my truck at 65. It was just a blur at first, but as I stared it became clear that something was out there, moving with me. It moved with a human-like gait, tall and impossibly fast, its limbs stretching and contracting in a way that was both familiar and deeply wrong. The figure seemed to glide, barely touching the ground. No animal could do that. No creature I knew could keep up with a speeding truck, especially out here in the middle of nowhere. No person should be out here. The desert was empty, silent, and cold. No reason for anyone to be running alongside a highway at this hour. I sped up, but it matched me stride for stride, gliding over the desert scrub. The faster I went, the faster it seemed to move, never losing ground, always just outside the reach of my headlights. The static on the radio grew louder, almost like laughter, a crackling, mocking sound that filled the cab and made my skin crawl. It was as if the night itself was taunting me. Fear gripped me. I realized I wasn't alone. I was being hunted. My mind raced, searching for explanations, but none made sense in the cold, endless dark. My hands clenched the wheel, breath shallow as the figure toyed with me, never falling behind. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The road felt endless, and escape seemed impossible. The darkness pressed in, and I realized that out here in the vast emptiness I was utterly at its mercy. The figure drifted into my headlights, its movement slow and unnatural, as if it belonged to another world entirely. The beams revealed a pale, stretched face, skin almost translucent, features twisted in a way that made my breath catch in my throat. Its eyes were like black pits, bottomless, empty, and utterly inhuman. They seemed to swallow the light, drawing me in with a cold, unfeeling stare that made my skin crawl. Its jaw hung slack, a thick, dark liquid slowly dripping from its mouth, pooling on the road below. It grinned at me, wide and unnatural, lips pulled back too far, exposing broken, jagged teeth that glistened in the headlights. Then it raised a hand, long, thin fingers ending in broken, filthy nails, waving at me in a slow, mocking gesture. The movement was deliberate, almost taunting, as if it knew the terror it inspired. Panic surged through me, overwhelming every rational thought. I swerved, tires screaming against the wet asphalt, my heart racing as I fought to regain control of the car. For a moment, I thought I might crash, but somehow I managed to steady the wheel. When I looked again, desperate to see if it was still there, the figure had vanished, gone without a trace, swallowed by the endless desert night as if it had never existed at all. My heart pounded in my chest, hands shaking uncontrollably as I gripped the steering wheel. The image of that face, those eyes, was burned into my mind, impossible to forget. I was utterly alone. The silence inside the car broken only by my ragged breathing. Yet the fear lingered, thick and suffocating, as real as the darkness pressing in from every side. The road ahead felt haunted by what I'd seen, every shadow a reminder that some nightmares don't end when you open your eyes. I didn't stop until I saw the glow of a lonely gas station, its neon sign flickering in the pale blue of early morning. The silence of the desert pressed in, broken only by the hum of the lights and the distant call of a coyote. I pulled in, feeling the weight of the night still clinging to my shoulders. The old man behind the counter looked up as I entered, his eyes sharp and knowing. "Rough night on 491?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Somehow, he knew exactly where I'd come from, as if he'd seen this before. He spoke in hushed tones about skinwalkers, creatures from old stories, said to feed on fear and loneliness, drawn to travelers who dared the highway after dark. He described the way they moved, shadows flickering at the edge of headlights, always watching, always waiting. "Don't look at them, don't show fear. They'll follow you," he warned, his gaze never leaving mine. There was a gravity in his words, a sense that this was more than just a story to scare travelers. He told me about a trucker who once tried to talk to the runner, a figure seen sprinting along the shoulder at night. The trucker vanished, his rig found days later, scratched deep as if by claws, abandoned in the rising sun. "Some things are best left alone, some roads best avoided after dark," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The warning felt ancient, echoing with the weight of countless stories and lost travelers. As dawn broke and the first rays of sunlight crept across the desert, his words echoed in my mind, lingering like a shadow I couldn't shake. I left that gas station with the uneasy feeling that my encounter wasn't truly over, that something out there was still watching, waiting for the next traveler to pass through the darkness. Months later, the fear still haunts me, a shadow in my life. I wake at night, heart pounding, convinced I hear scratching at my window. My truck bears deep, deliberate scratches, proof it was real. Sometimes I glimpse a tall, slender shadow in the corner of my eye, gone when I look. The old man said they don't always forget. If you're ever on a lonely road at night, don't slow down. Don't look, just drive. Some stories are warnings. Some roads are cursed. And some things in the dark are real. Have you ever heard a familiar voice call your name in the dead of night when you know you're alone? That moment when the world is silent and yet something stirs. A whisper that seems to come from nowhere, echoing through the darkness. It's a sensation that sends a chill down your spine, making you question what's real and what's imagined. In those quiet hours, our minds wander, and the unknown feels closer than ever. It's a chilling thought, a primal fear that taps into something ancient. For centuries, people have shared stories of voices in the night, of shadows that move just out of sight. I once dismissed such things as tricks of the mind, the product of overactive imagination or sleepless nights. But one summer on the Navajo reservation changed everything I thought I knew about fear, and about the boundaries between the seen and unseen. My grandmother's home was isolated, surrounded by red earth and mesas, the silence both calming and deeply isolating. By day the land was beautiful, sunlight painting the rocks in shades of gold and crimson, the sky stretching endlessly overhead. The air was dry and still, filled with the scent of sage and dust. It felt like a place untouched by time, where the past lingered just beneath the surface. But at night, the silence felt watchful, as if something unseen was waiting just beyond the porch light. The darkness pressed in from all sides, and every creak of the old house seemed amplified. I came seeking peace, hoping to escape the noise of the city, but quickly learned that in this place you are never truly alone. The land itself seemed to hold its breath, as if listening for something, or someone. Some legends, I discovered, are warnings, meant to keep you safe after dark. They are not just stories, but lessons passed down through generations, reminders that the unknown is closer than we think. In the heart of the desert, I learned to listen, to respect the silence, and to heed the invitation to the unknown with caution. My grandmother, deeply rooted in the ancient Dine tradition, would sit with me on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, her eyes scanning the vast open desert. She spoke in hushed tones of the Yi-Naldlushi, creatures whose name was never uttered after sunset, as if even the mention could invite their presence. Her voice, low and steady, carried the weight of generations, and I could sense the seriousness in her every word. She warned me with a gravity that made my skin prickle. These beings, she said, could mimic any sound, even the comforting voices of those you loved most, all to lure you outside into the darkness. Her stories weren't just old superstitions passed down for entertainment. They were hard-earned survival lessons, shaped by the harsh realities of life on the high desert. She wanted me to understand that the world outside our door was not always what it seemed. Each night, she laid down strict rules with unwavering conviction: never whistle after dark, never answer voices calling from outside, and above all, never speak their name when the stars were out. These rules were not to be questioned or bent, no matter how curious or brave I felt. She would move quietly through the house, closing blinds and turning off lights, her movements deliberate, as if performing a sacred ritual of protection. On those nights when the desert wind rattled the old wooden door, every creak and whisper seemed amplified, as if the darkness itself was alive and watching. The shadows stretched long across the floor, and the howling wind outside felt like it carried voices, soft, insistent, and impossible to ignore. I realized then that her fear was not just a story, but a living, breathing presence that pressed in from the endless night. The rules my grandmother taught me weren't just tradition. They were a shield, a way to keep the unknown at bay. As I sat by the window, listening to the wind and the distant, unexplainable sounds, I felt the weight of her wisdom settle over me. The night pressed in, thick and heavy, and I understood that in this land of secrets, listening and believing could mean the difference between safety and danger. At first I rationalized the strange sounds, scratching, tapping, footsteps, as harmless. But the noises grew deliberate, rhythmic tapping, slow scratching, footsteps with no source. My grandmother's grim response to my concerns was more frightening than the sounds themselves. We locked doors early, drew curtains tight, and she prayed each night. The desert's vastness became suffocating, the isolation now menacing. I realized the rules weren't just for comfort, they were a shield against something real. The night was no longer for rest, but for vigilance. The nightly disturbances escalated, a high-pitched, sorrowful whine outside, heavy thuds on the roof, and sharp cracks at my window. Then, I heard my own name whispered from the darkness, in my own voice. My skepticism shattered, terror took its place. Every warning from my grandmother echoed in my mind. This was no prank or imagination, something intelligent and malicious was focused on me. The fear was overwhelming, a tidal wave I couldn't escape. I backed away from the window, trembling, knowing the stories were true. The symphony of fear had reached its peak. The real nightmare was about to begin. At 3 a.m. I heard my grandmother's voice outside my window, pleading to be let in, but she was asleep down the hall. A slow, deliberate scratching began on the window screen. Against every instinct, I peeked through the curtain. A pale, skull-like face with black, empty eyes and a grotesque smile stared back at me. It tapped the glass, then spoke in my grandmother's voice, layered with an inhuman growl. "I see you!" I screamed and scrambled away, paralyzed by terror. The scratching turned violent. It wanted in. I knew if it succeeded I wouldn't survive the night. My scream brought my grandmother running. She slammed the shutters, locked the window and pulled me to the living room. Lighting sage, she chanted prayers, filling the house with protective smoke. She circled the room with salt, sealing every doorway and window. Outside, heavy thuds and dragging sounds moved across the roof. We huddled together, surrounded by smoke and salt, her faith a shield against the terror. The noises continued until dawn, but nothing broke through. As sunlight returned, the presence vanished, but the fear remained. At dawn, we found deep, unnatural tracks beneath my window and claw marks on the screen. The air was thick with a silence that felt unnatural, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Each mark seemed to pulse with a warning, a message left behind by something that did not belong in the world of daylight. I remember the way my heart pounded, the sense that I was being watched even as the sun began to rise. I left that day, my grandmother giving me a pouch of protective herbs. She pressed it into my palm with trembling hands, her eyes never meeting mine. She whispered old words, prayers meant to keep evil at bay, and told me to never let the pouch leave my side. The scent of sage and cedar clung to me, a fragile shield against the unknown. The encounter haunted me, waking at 3:04 a.m., hearing faint scratches, feeling watched. Night after night I would lie awake, listening to the house settle, every creak and groan magnified by fear. Sometimes I thought I saw shapes moving in the corners of my room, shadows that didn't belong. Sleep became a stranger, and I wondered if I would ever feel safe again. Some things, once they find you, never truly let go. Their presence lingers, a chill in the air, a whisper in the dark. I learned to move quietly to avoid drawing attention, but the feeling of being followed never faded. It was as if the darkness itself had grown eyes, watching, waiting for me to slip. I learned that some mysteries are meant to be respected, not solved. There are questions better left unasked, stories that should remain untold. The forest at dawn, shrouded in mist, became a place of reverence and fear. I realized that curiosity can be dangerous, and that wisdom sometimes means turning away. The Skinwalker is no myth for those who live in its shadow. For us, it is a reality woven into the fabric of our nights, a presence that shapes the way we live and the stories we tell. The legends are warnings, not just tales, and those who ignore them do so at their own peril. If you ever hear a familiar voice in the dark, do not answer, do not look, do not invite it in. The things that mimic what you love are the most dangerous of all. They know your fears, your hopes, and they use them to draw you closer. The safest choice is to trust your instincts and keep the door closed. Some things are patient, and all they want is for you to acknowledge them. The moment you do, you give them power. So I live quietly, never speaking of what I saw, always remembering the lesson. respect the unknown, and never invite the darkness in.